Hi everyone, this is Liz Stanton from Synapse Energy Economics, and we are starting now our webinar on cutting electric bills with the Clean Power Plan. We're here in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and from Synapse, which I think most of you probably know us already, but I'll just say quickly that we're a consulting firm doing work in electric and other energy issues in relation to environmental policy. Today, our presenters are Pat Knight and Avi Allison, and they're going to be leading off in just a moment and telling you all about our fact sheet and report that were released today. Before I tell you about the webinar logistics, I just wanted to let anyone know who didn't see the notice that went out yesterday or the day before that we have inadvertently scheduled this webinar at the same time that EPA is having a webinar on energy efficiency and the Clean Power Plan. And so what we've done is we've scheduled a second time for us to give this same webinar. We're going to be giving it next Tuesday, just repeating what we're doing today. At 2 o'clock, and so we didn't want anybody to have to choose to only be at one webinar, EPA's or Synapse's or the other. So if you need to be over at the EPA webinar, that's great, and we'll be repeating this on Tuesday at 2. And if you didn't get an invite to that, just write to us and we'll make sure that you do. So webinar logistics. The way we do this is that we will take both a recording of today and the slides. We're going to be posting it online and sending it out to all of the participants. Everybody out there except for us is muted right now, and it's going to remain that way throughout the presentation and question period. So the way to ask your questions is to write to us. The email is webinar@synapse-energy.com. And I'm the moderator today, and I'm going to be monitoring those questions. And after the presentation, which will be about a half an hour, I'll be asking your questions of the webinar presenters. If you have a technical issue, please use the chat feature in WebEx, which you can see here on your screen, to let us know what's going on for you, and we'll try to help you out with that. But for a substantive question that you'd like to hear the presenters answer, that's webinar@synapse-energy.com. Did this one already? I think I got out of order here. And here's the agenda of what we're going to be doing, and I'll turn it over now to Pat to start us off.
All right. Thanks, Liz, for that introduction. So, as Liz said, today we'll be talking about the Clean Power Plan and monthly electric bills. After this agenda, I'll be diving into an overview of general Clean Power Plan topics. Then I'll go on to key findings and give a brief summary of what we found. After that, I'll be talking a little bit about the methodology that we used in this analysis, along with energy efficiency's role in the Clean Power Plan. And then after that, I'll be turning it over to Avi, who will be digging into the state-specific results of our analysis. Finally, at the end, we'll be spending a little bit of time talking about resources and next steps. So just to give a bit of an overview, the Clean Power Plan was released by the EPA in a finalized form on October 23rd in last year. The point of the Clean Power Plan is to reduce CO2 pollution from the electric sector. And under the target set by the Clean Power Plan, it's expected that the plan will reduce CO2 emissions by the time it gets to 2030 to levels about 30% below 2005 CO2 emissions levels. Core in the Clean Power Plan is an integrated stakeholder process. And also core in the plan is flexibility. EPA has designed a off-the-shelf model rule for use in the plan, but it's also allowing states to make their own compliance plans if they so desire. What we did in this project with respect to the Clean Power Plan was we modeled compliance in the 48 contiguous states. The three scenarios that we looked at were, one, the not CPP compliant scenario, which is what you can think of as a base case or a reference case or a business as usual, a future in which there is no Clean Power Plan and there is also no other new policies. The second scenario we looked at is what we're calling the Synapse CPP scenario. And this scenario features compliance with the Clean Power Plan through the use of aggressive or strong energy efficiency measures. The third scenario that we'll be talking about today is the low EE CPP scenario. And this is a scenario in which there is minimal energy efficiency and instead compliance is achieved through the use of renewables and expanded natural gas. In each scenario, we examined the impacts of compliance on household electric bills in each state. And in doing so, we paid special attention to the relationship between bill savings and current state-level energy efficiency standards, state-specific emission reductions, and poverty rates. So just to give you the headline about the key findings, what we found was that ratepayers can save money under the Clean Power Plan. We found that if states comply with the Clean Power Plan through strategies that encourage cost-effective energy efficiency, households can expect to save an average of $17 per month on their electric bills in 2030. Depending on the state, individuals can see monthly bill savings of anywhere from $2 to $44. In the next couple of slides, I'll be discussing the methodology behind our analysis and how energy efficiency fits in the Clean Power Plan before Avi comes back to this slide and others like it and explains the in-depth state-specific results. So onto the methodology. For this analysis, we used our Synapse Clean Power Plan Toolkit. This toolkit involves bringing together inputs from a number of different models, including one, the cavity model, which forecasts future costs of environmental retrofits at coal plants that have nothing to do with the Clean Power Plan. They're meant for other regulations. And another model, the Energy Efficiency Savings Tool, which brings together information about future costs and projections of energy efficiency. We took these two models in conjunction with the READS model. Now, the READS model is a dispatch model created by NREL and heavily customized by Synapse. Using READS, we can account for known unit retirements, known future unit additions, fuel price forecasts, and other inputs, and generate information about future levels of generation, emissions, and costs. After all of that, we take the outputs from that READS model and bring it into our report and CP3T models. And using those, we can look at how scenarios stack up in terms of Clean Power Plan compliance and what the implication is in terms of monthly electric residential bills. In this analysis, as I was saying, we looked at 3 different scenarios. And I'm just going to spend a minute or two here talking a little bit about the differences between the 3 scenarios. So the first scenario that we looked at was that reference case, or business as usual, and we're calling our not CPP compliant scenario. As it says in the name, this scenario is not CPP compliant and represents a future in which there are no new policies, including no CPP. The next scenario is the Synapse CPP scenario, and this scenario is Clean Power Plan compliant. In terms of the approach used, it's looking at mass-based targets, the existing plus new targets specifically, and it achieves compliance with the Clean Power Plan by using strong investment in energy efficiency. The third scenario we looked at is the low EE CPP scenario. This scenario is also Clean Power Plan compliant, and it also looked at the exact same mass-based existing plus new targets. In this scenario, rather than using strong investments in energy efficiency, we looked at what it would mean to use NGCC generation and renewables in order to meet Clean Power Plan compliance. Now, one important thing to remember is that across all of these scenarios, we're making the same assumptions about electric retail sales demand, that is apart from energy efficiency, natural gas prices. We're making the same assumptions about on-the-books retirements and unit additions. We're making the same assumptions about current state requirements for energy efficiency and renewables, so that's state EERSs and state RPSs. And we're making the same assumptions about future environmental retrofits that will be required regardless of the Clean Power Plan. One last note about our 2 Clean Power Plan compliance scenarios. In both the scenarios, we looked at trading in the same way. Both scenarios permit allowance trading in 2 separate regions. The RGGI states, which are the 9 states in the Northeast that are currently involved in the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. So it's a carbon trading program that's currently in place. We're assuming those states have their own sort of trading zone, and the rest of the United States, which has a second trading zone. Here's a chart describing the scenario generation between the three different scenarios. So this is a bar chart showing generation in terawatt hours in 2012, kind of a baseline or reference year, 2020, 2025, and 2030. And we're showing these future years for the three different scenarios. Our not CPP compliant scenario on the left-hand side, our Synapse CPP scenario in the middle, and the low EE CPP scenario on the right-hand side of each one of these sets of bars. On this chart, we're looking at generation from 6 different sources. Energy efficiency at the top, then renewables, which includes hydro, of course, wind, solar, geothermal, things like that. Next is NGCC, which is generation from natural gas combined cycle units. After that is coal, other, and then nuclear units. So a couple of interesting things to note about how our scenario inputs play out in terms of generation. One thing you'll notice is that our Synapse CPP scenario, as I was saying, relies heavily on energy efficiency by the year 2030 in order to achieve compliance with the Clean Power Plan, whereas the low EE CPP scenario relies more on expanded renewables and expanded natural gas relative to the reference case. One other thing you might notice right away here is that the generation from the Synapse CPP scenario is a little bit less than the other two, and this is a result of energy efficiency being a demand-side resource. And what this means is that less electricity is needed to be generated at the utility site, meaning that less electricity is lost as it's transmitted across wires to end consumers. So the end result is more energy efficiency means less electricity is needed to be generated overall to maintain the same level of service and reliability. So speaking about energy efficiency, I'm going to spend the next couple of slides talking about what energy efficiency means within the context of the Clean Power Plan. Now, there's been a bit of sort of debate or controversy recently that we've noticed about energy efficiency and whether or not it even has a role in the Clean Power Plan. And in our general opinion, we think that this has a lot to do with the fact that energy efficiency has been removed from the final Clean Power Plan's target setting in terms of a building block. That said, energy efficiency still has a critical role in the Clean Power Plan. Now, if you're talking about rate-based approaches, which isn't something that we analyzed here, energy efficiency very explicitly gets direct incentives. And they get direct incentives in the sense that for every megawatt hour of energy efficiency that's saved, the people that put those energy efficiency measures in place get a certificate which they can then turn around and sell to polluters. On the other hand, in mass-based approaches, energy efficiency, the role of it is a little bit more complicated. Now, as I was talking about in the previous slide, in any situation, energy efficiency is a cost-effective way to reduce demand for electricity. If there's more energy efficiency, that means less other generation is required, and often that means that emissions are reduced and other mass-based compliance actions are less needed in order to achieve compliance. The second way that energy efficiency can be used in mass-based approaches is in the sense that states can take action to develop customized plans that further encourage energy efficiency beyond what is in the current model rule. To discuss that a little bit, in the model rule of the Clean Power Plan, allowances are given freely to polluters, with the exception of a small % of allowances reserved for set-asides. When polluters wish to emit a ton of CO2, they must possess an allowance. So if they weren't given enough at the start of the period, they have to go out and buy one on the market. Now, what states can do is develop their own customized plans in which allowances are allocated differently. So first, states could do something like give allowances directly to those providing energy efficiency measures. So those providers would then sell the allowances to polluters, generating revenue and offsetting the cost of installing new energy efficiency measures. And you can kind of think of this as an expansion of the set-aside programs that are currently in place. The second way that states can develop their own customized plans in order to encourage energy efficiency is to auction allowances. Now, what this means is that states would run an auction. People that wish to buy allowances would pay some amount of money, and then that money would be redistributed to energy efficiency programs. This is similar to the approach currently used in the RGGI states, where in 2014 alone, $367 million was raised in RGGI auctions, the lion's share of which was redistributed to energy efficiency programs. So with all that said, I'm going to be turning it over to Avi. As a reminder, if you have any questions about the content of what we've been discussing, please go ahead and email those questions to webinar@synapse-energy.com. If you have any technical issues, please use the chat function in WebEx, and we'll be happy to answer them there.
Great. Thanks, Pat. So I'm going to dive into some of the results coming out of our study. These first few results I'm going to be talking about are based on a comparison between the not CPP compliant scenario and our Synapse CPP scenario. As a reminder, our not CPP compliant scenario, again, is a base case that does not involve any compliance with the Clean Power Plan, whereas our Synapse CPP scenario requires compliance with the Clean Power Plan using aggressive energy efficiency. I'm going to be presenting 7 key findings here today. The first is that strong investments in energy efficiency both allow compliance with the Clean Power Plan while saving ratepayers an average of $17 per month. So this bar chart shows 2030 monthly bill savings. These are residential monthly bill savings in the year 2030. And we have these bill savings by state. They're ranked, as you can see, in order of highest to lowest bill savings, moving from left to right. The bill savings range from a high of $44 per month in Wyoming to a low of $2 per month in Illinois. And there are several reasons why there's such variability in bill savings. 2 of the most prominent are the presence or absence of energy efficiency requirements and the resources used to generate power now and in the future. So for example, over here on the left, Wyoming and New York both lack strong energy efficiency requirements. They lack those requirements at all, in fact. And in the not CPP compliant scenario, they end up building a lot of natural gas and wind plants that are not necessary under the Synapse CPP scenario with its strong energy efficiency. In contrast, over here on the right, we have states like Illinois, which has one of the strongest energy efficiency standards in the nation in place right now, so there's less to gain by further energy efficiency. Our second key finding is that large emission reductions do not prevent bill savings. So here we have a scatter plot showing each state in terms of both its monthly bill savings in 2030 and its carbon dioxide emission reductions from 2005 to 2030 under the Synapse CPP scenario. Each red dot on this chart represents a state, and we've gone ahead and labeled many of these states around the edges of the chart, so you can see certain outliers such as Wyoming towards the top of the chart, up here, and again Illinois down towards the bottom, and then some states that are reducing their emissions by 100%, so cutting their emissions all the way down to 0, which are Vermont and Washington. So you can see in general by this chart that there's no strong relationship between carbon dioxide emission reductions and monthly bill savings. Of the 7 states with the highest bill savings, it so happens that 6 cut their carbon dioxide emission reductions by more than 45% between 2005 and 2030. And our 2 states that reduced their emissions down to 0, Vermont and Washington, both have strong bill savings of upwards of $15 per month. So clearly, again, strong emission reductions does not mean low bill savings or costs of any kind. Our third finding is that large bill savings are found in states that have high poverty rates. This is a bar chart that is identical to the first chart we presented, except that we've gone ahead and highlighted states with poverty rates that are above the national poverty rate. Of the 8 states with the highest monthly bill savings between the Synapse CPP case and the not CPP compliant case, 5 have poverty rates in excess of the national rate, and these 5 happen to include Alabama and Kentucky, which are 2 of the states with the highest poverty rates in the nation. So what this means is that energy efficiency could potentially be a tool to both reduce emissions and address savings and create savings across the country, and more specifically, create savings in states where those savings are most needed, states that have high poverty rates. Our 4th finding is that the largest bill savings we found are in states that lack current energy efficiency requirements. The bar chart on this slide is, again, identical to the previous slide, except for instead of highlighting states with high poverty rates, here we've highlighted states that lack current energy efficiency standards. What we mean by energy efficiency standards are legally binding requirements that demand that utility companies attain a certain percentage of energy efficiency savings on an incremental basis. Now, in the absence of these standards, energy efficiency is clearly much less likely to happen. It is not generally in the interest of utilities to invest in these sorts of energy efficiency measures in the absence of requirements. One important note about the way we've modeled these scenarios is that in our not CPP compliant scenario, and also in our low E CPP scenario that we discuss later, we assume that if a state does not have a current energy efficiency standard, they will not be implementing any energy efficiency whatsoever, because there's no reason for them to have to do that. Whereas in our Synapse CPP scenario, again, there are strong energy efficiency improvements. So we look at this chart over here, the entire left half is taken up by states that do not have any existing policies requiring future energy efficiency savings. So these are the 24 states with the highest monthly bill savings, and not one of them has an energy efficiency standard. This means that regardless of strategy for clean power compliance, clean power plan compliance, states that lack energy efficiency standards are leaving money on the table that could help lower bills for their residential consumers. Now we're going to transition and talk about a different set of comparisons. So far, we've been comparing the not CPP compliant scenario with our Synapse CPP scenario, but now we're going to start talking about 2 CPP compliant scenarios. On the one hand, our Synapse CPP scenario, again featuring aggressive energy efficiency, and on the other hand, our low EE CPP scenario, which complies with the Clean Power Plan, but does not involve strong energy efficiency measures. Our 5th key finding is that energy efficiency is the cheapest way to reduce carbon dioxide emissions. So here again, we have a chart showing 2030 residential monthly bill savings, this time between the Synapse CPP case and the low EE CPP case. On average, households in the United States will save $21 per month on their bills in the Synapse CPP case relative to the low EE CPP case. Average savings range across states from a high of $33 per month in Wyoming to a low of $5 per month in Maryland. And once again, the variability in savings is largely a result of whether a state has an energy efficiency standard in place or not. Our 6th key finding is that energy efficiency is an especially cheap compliance strategy in high poverty states. This chart, again, is identical to the chart before, except that it highlights states with higher than average poverty rates. And as you can see, of the 10 states with the highest monthly bill savings, 9 have poverty rates in excess of the national rate. So the relationship between poverty and bill savings in our analysis is actually much stronger in this comparison than it was in the comparison to the not compliant scenario, which we showed earlier. Again, this means that energy efficiency can be a strong way to help reduce poverty as well as reducing emissions. It's important to note 2 things. One, that low-income consumers, people in poverty, tend to spend a disproportionate percentage of their income on energy. So these bill savings are significant, especially for those customers. Another thing is that for these gains from energy efficiency to take place, it's important that energy efficiency programs reach all customers, including those that are harder to reach, which often includes low-income customers. Synapse has priorly presented a webinar discussing strategies for engaging these harder-to-reach customers. And again, those strategies are critical to achieve the dual goals of reducing poverty and achieving emission reductions. Our seventh and final finding is that efficiency is an especially cheap compliance strategy in states without efficiency standards. This is a bar chart, again, identical to the previous one, except it highlights states without current energy efficiency standards. Here, again, we see that the 24 states with the highest monthly bill savings have zero. None of these states have existing policies requiring future energy efficiency savings. This again shows that energy efficiency is a critical component of cost-effective compliance with the Clean Power Plan. Now I'm going to pass it back to Liz to talk a little bit about Synapse resources related to the Clean Power Plan.
Great, and thanks both of you for a great presentation. We've had a bunch of questions coming in, and I'm going to be asking you those questions in just a minute. And please go ahead and keep on sending questions to the webinar at synapse-energy.com email address so that we can discuss them here. We have a lot of resources related to Clean Power Plan up on our website. There's a list here, and it probably only covers some of what we've done at this point. We've been doing a lot of interesting work for different folks around the country about Clean Power Plan, trying to help make the rule more accessible to people with non-technical backgrounds, and also trying to dig in and do analysis of what kind of impacts the rule will have, especially on consumers. This is going to remind you again about, we're doing a repeat of this webinar in case any of your colleagues want to catch it next Tuesday, January 19th at 2 p.m. We'll be doing this same webinar over again so that some of the folks that are on the EPA Energy Efficiency and Clean Power Plan webinar right now will have a chance to also listen to this webinar. And we'll also be sending out the slides and the recording of this to all of you and putting it up on our website. We also have another webinar coming up on February 2nd that is going to be digging into the policy impacts of the Clean Power Plan, and especially giving some thought to how to think about the Clean Power Plan and how it's going to affect public health, how it's going to affect electric bills, and other public welfare issues. And here are some links for you, how to stay connected to Synapse, and you'll have all of these available to you when you receive the slides. So if you need to check anything out, it includes a link to our free CP3T, that's Clean Power Plan Planning Tool Model. That's something you can download at home or back in your office, I suppose, and be able to take a look at how Clean Power Plan compliance looks for different states, try out different things, and experiment with it. And finally, here are our various email addresses for you to write to and reach out to us if you have additional questions that we don't get a chance to answer today. So let's start to dig in, and I'm going to ask the presenters some questions. First, one thing that would be helpful to understand a little better is the trading that's going on here. So some states trade, other states don't trade, or some states are affected more by trading. Can you just dig into both the methodology that you're using for trading, and then also what the impact is of that?
Sure. So that's a really great question. So what we've done in this analysis is in each of our Clean Power Plan compliance scenarios, we sorted states into two different buckets. One bucket is the 9 RGGI states. So it's the 8 states that have Clean Power Plan requirements plus the state of Vermont, which although it doesn't have Clean Power Plan requirements, is still going to be affected by its neighbors' choices in the Clean Power Plan. Then we take the other states, the other 37 states, the other 39 states rather, and put them in a rest of U.S. bucket. And within these two buckets, units within each state can trade with one another across state lines. As a result, what you end up seeing is you see some states that continue to emit nominally above their Clean Power Plan limit, but achieve compliance by purchasing allowances from other states within their trading pool.
Great, that's really helpful. And I think another question here that I'm reading from the various questions that have come in and trying to kind of distill them and combine them for you is once you've introduced trading into the model, one concern that folks are having about that is what it means for hotspots, for having concentrations of pollutants. And of course, with CO2, we're not concerned about a concentration of CO2. It's a global pollutant, but there are co-pollutants that go along with CO2 that could become concentrated. So can you both explain the issue of how trading could create a hotspot and then sort of remark on that or what your thoughts are about that?
Sure. So this is a really important issue, and it's one that we here at Synapse have been thinking a lot about recently in the past weeks and months. So again, for people who aren't familiar with it, the idea is that through what a hotspot is through the use of trading, you have units in certain locations that may not reduce their emissions to a level that other units do, or they actually might, who knows, maybe increase emissions relative to all other units. Yet they still achieve compliance by paying other units within their trading pool, and by paying them for allowances that permit those units to maintain a level of emissions or perhaps not reduce emissions as far as they might otherwise do that. And as Liz was saying, CO2 is a global pollutant. So in the sense that CO2 affects local communities, that's not such a big issue. But what the big issue really is that when CO2 is produced, oftentimes there's many co-pollutants that really dramatically and significantly affect the public health of the neighbors of the residential neighbors of the power plant. So one thing that's important to do in as folks go forward in thinking about hotspots and what to do with them within the context of the Clean Power Plan is first to think about what plants are going to be hotspots. It's certain that not all plants will be hotspots. Certainly to achieve some level of emission reductions, some units will have to back off on their emissions, but it's possible that, like I said, other units could maintain, increase, or maybe just not decrease quite as far their own emissions. So it's important to figure out which plants those are going to be. Secondly, there are solutions within the Clean Power Plan to address this. As I was saying at the beginning of the presentation, states have a great degree of flexibility under the Clean Power Plan to create their own sort of sub-rules within the approach that they choose to address issues like hotspots. So, for example, one thing that states could put into place is to require all units, regardless of economic viability, to reduce emissions to some certain level before they're allowed to engage in a trading program. So in effect, you can imagine this resulting in the same level of reductions that EPA requires at the beginning. It just requires that all of the units see some level of emission reductions relative to present day. So that's one option that states have in order to try to head off the problem of hotspots and try to use the Clean Power Plan as a way to ensure the reduction of those co-pollutants that are so harmful to public health in local communities.
Great, thank you. I also have a question about Vermont and how you're treating it in this analysis, and it got mentioned along the way in the presentation. Can you just clarify, we know that Vermont doesn't actually have a target, so what's Vermont doing in here? How are you thinking about Vermont?
Sure, that's a great, interesting modeling question. So we model our three scenarios in the READS model, which is a national scale model that looks at the entire electric system. So if there's something happening in certain states and that causes their electric system to change, those states are connected to other states, and there will be dynamics that play out in those other states as a result of those rules that might not necessarily affect them. Now, what's especially interesting for Vermont and the 8 other RGGI states in particular is they have their own RGGI targets for regulating clean power plant emissions on top of the regulating carbon dioxide emissions on top of the clean power plant. So in our modeling, we assumed that the non-RGGI states achieve their limits for the clean power plan, but the 9 RGGI states actually meet their slightly more stringent RGGI targets instead of their clean power plan targets. And since Vermont is a part of that trading pool, it implies that perhaps those 9 RGGI states will band together to create a 9-state RGGI state implementation plan that will allow Vermont to definitely participate within a clean power plan trading scheme.
Okay, thanks. That really helps to clarify. So I've had a couple questions about, well, there are some states, as we know, that are working on, through legislation or other means within their state, to try to put up barriers to compliance with the Clean Power Plan in one way or another. And so the question would be, for those states, what does this analysis tell us, or how do you relate this analysis to circumstances where states are working actively, or some actors within states are working actively to prevent compliance with Clean Power Plans?
Sure. So another great question. So it's my understanding that in many states that are pursuing legal action against the EPA because of the Clean Power Plan, in many, but perhaps not all of the states, there are still actors that are moving forward to ensure that if the Clean Power Plan is upheld, then those states are still prepared to meet the requirements set out by the plan. And going back to an earlier point I was making, if states do not, say in a future where the Clean Power Plan is upheld, and states do not make a plan, then do not make a state plan, then they will be forced to take the model rule, which may not have all the benefits that that state could get if they were to develop their own individual state customized plan. So the Clean Power Plan offers a very large degree of flexibility, and if states, and even the states that are currently suing the EPA, take advantage of this flexibility to develop plans that are really focused on the strengths of that state, or perhaps really encourage energy efficiency to get the most in terms of consumer bill reductions, then I think those are the states that will be the best off, whether or not they're the states that are currently suing the EPA or not.
Great, thanks. One question I have here is, tell us how you determine the level of energy efficiency in that Synapse Clean Power Plan scenario. So what is that level, and why did you make it that?
Sure, yeah, so we determined that level based off of the strongest level that we've found to be present in the United States, and that level is found in the state of Massachusetts. And based off of what Massachusetts is currently attaining, we said, well, at least that level must be attainable, otherwise no one would be attaining it. So more efficiency is possible than that, but we said at a minimum that should be an aggressive standard, and that's where we set levels.
So just to add on a little bit to that, what's interesting is that, number one, it's not just that Massachusetts is achieving this level of savings, 3% per year in 2015 or 2016. Massachusetts has achieved levels at or near that level for the past 3 years, and the utilities in Massachusetts have just filed their 3-year state energy efficiency plans, which show that they plan to achieve the same level, and in some cases actually increase that level of energy efficiency between now and 2018. Massachusetts also isn't the only state that's currently achieving high levels of energy efficiency. States like Arizona, California, Rhode Island, and Vermont are also making a lot of headway in aggressive energy efficiency and finding that it's a great way to reduce emissions and costs for the residential ratepayers.
So I'll be the devil's advocate and follow it up with another question. Why should we believe that that's achievable in other states? I mean, you might also talk about how you're ramping up to it for other states, but you know, why should I believe that? Why should I believe that that's possible?
Sure. I mean, I think we addressed this a bit earlier when Avi was talking about the low-income states. In order to achieve 3% levels of savings per year, every single year, between, not now, as Liz said, we do ramp up from present-day levels into 3% levels, but you know, for a significant part of the future, states and the utilities in those states are going to have to make a lot of headway in making sure that the needs of hard-to-reach customers are met. And what that means is by going out to low-income customers and making sure that they're getting the same energy efficiency savings as everybody else. Another area of savings that is, for some reason, frequently not talked about when talking about energy efficiency is savings achieved by commercial and industrial, or C&I, customers. In Massachusetts, a significant part of the state savings achieved each year come from C&I customers, about 50%. So in the sense that where stakeholders are thinking about future energy efficiency programs and how to make those fit within the Clean Power Plan, it's really important to not lose sight of the other sort of two sectors that aren't residential, the low-income sectors, which is, I guess, sort of a special sector within the residential sector, and the C&I sectors. These are both areas with a lot of potential for energy efficiency savings, and savings shouldn't be left on the table in those sectors as well.
Thank you. I think it would help now to talk a little bit more about the methodology of the model. There have been some questions about how, if and how we're imposing a carbon price on different states, and so some questions about, you know, are we using an exogenous carbon price? So in the most non-technical way that you could, let's talk a little bit about how the model uses a carbon price and where that comes from.
Sure. So READS is a dispatch model. It's not an hourly dispatch model. What it does is it separates each year into 17 different time slices. And time slices might represent things like daytime in the summer, or nighttime in the winter, or maybe evening in the spring or fall. And within each one of those time slices for each year, the model tries to optimize, given all of the constraints that it's given, and tries to figure out what the least cost way to provide electricity is, what the least cost way to provide electricity is, which is something that many ISOs, RTOs, and vertically integrated utilities do around the country today. So within the context of the model knowing that it has some constraint about carbon caps, it creates a shadow price effectively in the model that causes certain units to decrease their generation overall, and for other units where they're suddenly more economical relative to those units that that have their costs raised by the shadow price, causes the second group of units to perhaps increase their generation. And as time goes on, that shadow price affects the overall costs of different sets of units and results in a changed dispatch relative to a reference case where carbon emissions are reduced and also generation has been changed in some way.
Mm-hmm. So we're not setting a carbon price at any point in this. That would be one way to achieve emissions reductions. You could set a price by whatever mechanism, and then the real world or the model would respond by reducing emissions. Instead, what we're doing is setting a cap on emissions, saying to the model, you can only have this much emissions and no more in each state. And in response, it's figuring out what's the least expensive way to do that. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think that's a good assessment of it. So we're not giving it a carbon price. It's effectively figuring out what the carbon price is in each year and creating a scenario based around that.
A few questions here about energy efficiency. You mentioned at some point energy efficiency providers. This is in the context of who gets ERC, the rate-based credit. what's an energy efficiency provider? Can you just explain that?
Sure. So I think the definition of that might change depending on what state you're in. In a lot of states, people think about utilities as being the major energy efficiency provider. In a lot of places where there is an ERS, an energy efficiency resource standard, utilities are required to meet some level of future sales through the use of installing energy efficiency measures. However, there are states out there like Maine and New York, for example, where the energy efficiency provider is actually a often semi-governmental organization. And they've done this, they've created this sort of third-party organization in a way in order to reduce the conflict that Avi was talking about, where a lot of times energy efficiency savings actually work against utilities' objectives of generating more revenue and more profits. So it's thought that these third-party providers, which are often called program administrators, just as a general term, that those are a different way in order to get around the conflict of trying to achieve more energy efficiency, but not having the utility be necessarily the best actor to do that. A third option would be true sort of third-party providers, and these are often private corporations that exist to go out to oftentimes C&I customers and reduce their energy consumption in return for a share of the savings. So depending on where you are and what perspective you have and what sort of organizations you're talking about, the definition of energy efficiency provider might change. Another way that I actually just thought of is nowhere in there did I talk about sort of regulating energy efficiency, and this is actually a really important piece. Through the use of appliance standards and lighting standards and state and federal building codes, energy efficiency savings can be achieved from a electric system cost perspective, essentially for free. So by requiring lighting, for example, to be of a certain standard, there really is no provider in that sense. In this analysis, we've kind of thought about and priced our energy efficiency around the cost of utilities and general program administrators implementing energy efficiency, but there's no reason that those savings couldn't come from those third-party corporations or from those federal and state level requirements.
So if I'd like to have some more insulation in my home, then give us an example to try to explain what the energy efficiency provider is. I could just go to a store and get some insulation and put it in my attic, but usually what happens?
So many times you can just go to your utilities website and see what they have to say about energy efficiency. In Massachusetts, there's a program called Mass Save, which is actually across all of the different utilities. And we actually have a special entity in our state called a program administrator that is a sort of a non-utility organization in addition to the utilities. So if you were to go to the Mass Save website, it would basically do the whole thing for you. You wouldn't even have to think about who your energy efficiency provider would be. So there's a lot of novel ways that states like Massachusetts and Arizona and Rhode Island and Vermont, California, and others that are achieving high levels of energy efficiency that have done things, that have structured their programs in such a way to encourage greater participation and lower the barriers and help to answer that question of, if I want to do energy efficiency, who do I actually talk to?
And the sense in which they are doing it for me is that they would send somebody to my home to do an energy audit and see what needs to happen, and would even send out contractors to make that happen, to put in the insulation. They would sometimes pay for part or all of the insulation so that I either had a lower cost or no cost.
And many times these energy efficiency providers are just completely invisible to the consumer. So oftentimes you can walk into a Home Depot and see a CFL or an LED light bulb for very cheap. And to you it's just a sale, and you buy it and you go home happy. But what's happened is the utility or other energy efficiency provider has provided money to that Home Depot to carry those LEDs or CFLs at or lower than the cost. And it's meant as a way to incentivize consumers into buying those energy efficiency measures.
So a related question, thinking about, we mentioned RGGI, and that right now the RGGI program is a cap-and-trade program. It's collecting allowance monies, and these go back to the states. And then the states can do a variety of things with them, but much of that money is actually spent on energy efficiency programs in the Northeast states. So when we say that, can you just give some examples? So what are these energy efficiency, what's happening with that that's real tangible stuff?
So written into RGGI legislation in each state is a stipulation about what happens to the revenue that states get from auctions. And there's legislation that, say, Massachusetts gets X% and New York gets Y% and Rhode Island gets Z%. And they all get these pools of money, and then per their legislation, something happens to it. In certain states, it might go back directly into customer bills, offsetting their bills directly. In other states, that pool of money is further subdivided into the energy efficiency providers within that state. Again, for Massachusetts, it's a state that I know really well. We've got 5 or 6 different energy efficiency providers, and based on their level of sales, they're each entitled to a share of that revenue from the RGGI auctions. And that revenue then helps offset the cost that they were otherwise going to spend on energy efficiency measures. And of course, all along the way, there's checks on this system to make sure that the revenue that the RGGI revenue is offsetting properly revenue in other places, that it's being spent on energy efficiency measures and not on other things. So it kind of depends state by state, but basically you can imagine it as the pool starts out really big in the general RGGI auction and then shrinks as it gets a portion to each state, and then to each program, and then again after that to each energy efficiency provider within each state.
And then what's the real actual stuff that happens? I mean, you've already mentioned lowering the price on efficient light bulbs. I've mentioned insulation. So what other things are actually energy efficiency programs? What kind of things can get people more efficiency?
Sure. So there's a lot of other options. There's things like rebates on home furnaces and hot water heaters. There's rebates on air conditioners that are more energy efficient. There's rebates on heat pumps, which can be put in place and help to actually supply both home heating and air conditioning and are very efficient compared to similar technologies. So in a lot of senses, things that either are in your house that consume electricity or energy, or things that are sort of around your house that help to keep the energy in place. And all of these investments, if done on their own, have the possibility of being quite expensive. So the whole point of these energy efficiency programs and the revenues that come from RGGI, for example, are to reduce the costs and to offset the costs for residential and consumers in other sectors and encourage them to use less electricity and other types of energy.
Because while you can save money on your bills, over time, you still need to pay for these measures up front to get them in the first place.
Right. Right, and actually that raises a really good point that I hadn't thought of. So a while back we were talking about hard-to-reach customers, and a lot of times for hard-to-reach or low-income consumers, it doesn't matter that a furnace, for example, has a rebate up front. It's just still too darn expensive to pay for. So in some places, an interesting idea that energy efficiency providers have put in place is the idea of very low or zero interest loans to help low-income consumers who might not have the upfront money to participate in regular energy efficiency programs. It's meant to encourage them to participate even if they don't have that money right away.
So switching topics here for a minute, a question about our assumptions regarding nuclear power generation in the modeling. It looks pretty similar across the scenarios. What's going on there? What did we assume?
Sure. So we've assumed that all nuclear units operate for 60-year lifetimes. So what that means is that if the unit was built in, I'm just picking a number here, 2000, then it would operate through the year 2060. All of our analysis only goes through the year 2030, so this actually doesn't affect any units because all of them either have license extensions or their license extensions happen after 2030. So those end effects are not something that we're looking at in this model. That said, what this model does account for is nuclear retirements that are known currently. So things like Pilgrim in Massachusetts, and it's escaping my mind right now, but I know there's a couple or one or two nuclear units in the Midwest that have been announced for retirement and are not included in future parts or future years of our scenarios.
Mm-hmm. So if we were going out further to 2040, you would see a bunch of nuclear retirement with these assumptions, but because we're stopping at 2030, you don't see it.
That's right.
Mm-hmm. This is a question about energy efficiency in the business as usual scenario. Just sort of thinking about that, what assumption do we use? What's the right assumption there? How do we think about energy efficiency in a business as usual scenario if we see around us that energy efficiency has been increasing over time? Should it be increasing? Or you might start with how we define business as usual.
Yeah, so in our business as usual scenario, again, as noted earlier, we're assuming that there is going to be no energy efficiency happening in states that do not have energy efficiency resource standards. So our baseline, fundamentally, it's starting from EIA's Annual Energy Outlook 2015 forecast. And then on top of that, again, we're not including any efficiency except efficiency that's mandated in existing law. So states that do not have existing laws requiring energy efficiency investments do not see any additional incremental energy efficiency coming throughout our model period. For states that do have energy efficiency standards on the books, we are implementing enough energy efficiency to precisely meet and comply with those standards. And that's the way we've dealt with it.
Sure. So just to add a little bit to that, what you see a lot is if you look at recent historical data, even for states without energy efficiency requirements, like legislative requirements, those states still see some level of energy efficiency. And one way that you could model a business as usual case, not what we did here, but one way that you could model it is to assume that those states maintain the same level of energy efficiency going forward. So even in a state that has no requirement, assume that it's going to do the same thing over and over and over between here and the end of your study period. But who's to say that those states and the utilities in those states will continue to do that energy efficiency? If there's no legislative requirement for them to do so, what can you really say about the certainty behind those energy efficiency savings actually coming into place? So for that reason, if states did not have explicit on-the-book statutes requiring future energy efficiency, we assumed that after the year 2014, there is no future energy efficiency.
I'm going to ask one more question, and then I think we're going to have to close. And I know that I didn't get to everybody's questions. We have a bunch of questions left here still in the queue, and sorry about that. We're not going to automatically answer those questions via email. What I'm going to ask instead is that if you, because I think we've answered some questions indirectly here. So if you still have a question that you'd like us to answer, go ahead and email it to us again after the webinar. You can send it to that webinar ad address or to one of our individual email addresses. Just go ahead and ask again. We're happy to follow up on you, but you need to let us know that we didn't get to something that you still want to hear about. Here's the last question. Can you explain what, if anything, we're assuming about the distribution of allowances and who gets what? Is there an auction? What's going on there?
Sure. So this is another really important area, and it's something that I touched on earlier when I was talking about the role of energy efficiency in the Clean Power Plan. So up front, in the model rule, the sort of default option is for polluters to receive free allowances from their states. Now, as carbon caps decrease over time, those units will no longer receive the level of allowances that they received in past years, and as a result will have to decrease their generation and emissions over time. Now, our modeling actually doesn't make any assumptions about how these allowances are allocated, whether it's through an auction or whether it's through free allowances or some combination of the two. But there are definitely some interesting sensitivities out there, I imagine, that can really help to give a lot of information about what happens when free allowances are given versus what happens when an auction takes place.
Great. and I want to thank you both again, Pat and Avi. It was a great presentation, and thanks everybody for joining us and for sending in your questions. Please do, if you feel like we haven't answered your question, please go ahead and email it to us again. We're happy to help out and to chat with people. And also, please let your colleagues know that we are doing this webinar again next Tuesday at 2 o'clock. And thanks again.